A lot of people have talked about Daenerys to come back.
But they don't have to do that right away.
Right.
Welcome to the Sundowners Club. I'm your host, Sean, and today we're going to be talking about the latest updates on the new Jon Snow series that's been greenlit by HBO. Remember, today, if you like what you see and like what you hear, leave us a comment below, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit subscribe so that we can grow the content on the channel. Without further ado, the man on my right, my co-host Sterling. What's up, buddy?
Not much. How are you?
I'm good. So we're going to go through a couple updates on Jon Snow today. I know that this is probably one of the series that, out of all the things that have come out, all the content and the different streaming providers, some are hits, some are misses. This is the one that I think, coming off of House of the Dragon season 1, that everybody that I've talked to is probably the most interested in. It's one of the biggest IPs and brands out there, the Song of Fire and Ice, Game of Thrones. And so the information, as we've talked about before, is going to be coming in bits and bytes over the next few months until we get official announcements from HBO that will lead us into production and casting and some of the other things. So, first I want to go through what Gwendolyn Christie. We talked on the last time we talked about it. We talked about some of the other actors that had mentioned that they'd spoken to Kit Harington, and so now the latest to step in and make a comment was Gwendolyn Christie, who we know is Brienne of Tarth, probably one of the top 5 or 6 favorite characters in Game of Thrones story. I mean, like, big fan base, very interesting character. I thought she had a great story arc with Jamie. Those were some of my favorite episodes when it was her interaction with Jamie. I really like Brienne. And so it would make sense that if we're doing a Jon Snow series, that in some form or fashion, Brienne of Tarth is one of those characters that you might see again. And so she was on the red carpet, or was interviewed by Access Hollywood in the last couple of weeks, and it came up, what do you know about the Jon Snow series? And she mentioned that she had spoken to Kit Harington about it, and that she was excited for him to revisit this character again, and that it's such a great character, and was a big part of his life, that he put a lot of his blood, sweat, and tears into it. So, we now know that this is yet another actor that has been contacted by Kit. And so the first thing that I would ask you is, Brienne of Tarth, is that a character that, if you were going to pick, of several characters to potentially show up in a new Jon Snow series, would that be one of the characters you would like to see again?
Uh, I didn't mind her. She wasn't one of my favorites. Her story pretty much revolved around kind of what she did with Jamie Lannister, and then those are the most interesting parts. Jamie, obviously, he's not going to be in spinoff because I think this takes place after Game of Thrones, so that wouldn't really make sense. So you have to find a way for her to fit in, and kind of have her own story arc. I'm not sure how well they're going to do that. She didn't really have a whole lot to do with Jon Snow.
But she was the King's Guard at the end of the show, right?
Yes.
So she does have a role on the council.
All right.
And so if Bran would send her out, if playing upon the story, we know John's going to be beyond the wall,
Right.
and so that would be a potential role for her. And if Sansa's still around as the Queen of the North, then she obviously had a lot of her storyline was intertwined with Sansa. So I could see where they could bring Brienne in, especially if you're not going to be sending, of all the people that were on the council, you're not going to be sending in Samwell Tarly. You're not going to be sending Tyrion. Bran's not going to be going anywhere. So it would be, if there's anything to try to find out what's going on with Jon beyond the wall, it would be Brienne or Bronn.
Right.
Those would be the 2 people that would be dispatched. So I could see a place for her within the story. Maybe not in the first season, but I think what it shows you is that between Macy Williams, Amelia Clark, and Gwendolyn Christie, we have these actors, that have been part of this series, that are commenting that they've talked to Kit, that they know more than they're letting on, right? So they probably haven't seen scripts or anything, but they know that, hey, there's a potential that your character could be in season 2 or later on or whatever.
Right.
Just gauging interest, trying to see where people are in their lives. And I'm sure Kit, I think Kit was popular enough with the cast. If you see some of the post shows each season, they did reunions and Comic Con, and people always ribbed Kit and gave him a little bit hard time messing with him about his working conditions when everybody was always in all these warm climates. And Kit was in the north and in Iceland. So it seemed like they had a good relationship with Kit Harington, and he actually married the girl who Gret uh,
Yep.
played his uh, on the show that he married her. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention was that Gwendolyn Christie is yet another person that's come forward and said that she's spoken to Kit. Now Kit was on a podcast recently and he was tight-lipped. He said, "I know nothing," making the famous reference. So, Kit's not talking, and rightfully so. I mean, he's, the stories are probably going to change. We the last time we heard from George R. R. Martin, they were on the third revision of the script. So I would imagine that if the information is accurate and Kit came to George R. R. Martin with the story, which George said he did, and they had an initial idea for a treatment. Usually those treatments are not very long, right? So they go through bringing in writers and and going through various iterations of the script. So that story could change from what Kit's original thought process would be for where Jon Snow has been after speaking to George. And so as they refine it, stories can change. And so, we obviously, Kit's probably not going to want to go out and make any speeches until everything's locked down. But I will say that I spoke to someone that is very steeped in the Game of Thrones lore, who has covered the show and knows some of the people behind the scenes, going back to the Benioff and Weiss years. And I don't think I can give their name out. I haven't gotten permission to give their name out, but I just talked to them informally and said, "What do you think? Your guess of where do you think the story's going? With Jon Snow beyond the wall. That's all we know right now is it's going to take place after Game of Thrones. We don't know how far after Game of Thrones in terms of the events, in terms of years, but he's beyond the wall. And so, I asked this individual that I know is tied into the Game of Thrones world and the producers from the prior series and some of the people that are actually involved now with House of the Dragon and contacts at HBO. And they told me if you want to have an idea of where they believe it's going, go back and watch Game of Thrones season 4. And I don't know what episode it is. We'll have to find that out. Maybe we'll put it in the description notes of this video. But in season 4, there's a scene where the Night King, they take one of Craster's babies, one of Craster's sons from Craster's Keep, and they take it to the lands of Always Winter, which is far north beyond the wall where no life is not sustainable. So there's not people living there. And it's thought that that's where the White Walkers came from in the original Long Night. And so that episode where, if you remember, where they bring the baby and the Night King walks up and touches the baby on the face and the baby's eyes turn blue. This individual that's pretty connected to all things Game of Thrones said, look at that episode, go back and watch that, and that'll give you an idea of where they're going, where he thinks they're going, where he's heard that they're going, where this individual has heard. So I went back and kind of looked at it, and I was looking for, well, what's unique about it? Because we know in the original series, the Night King gets stabbed by the cat's paw dagger from Arya,
Arya.
and as the Night King, crumbles into pieces, everybody else around him dies. Well, the assumption is that the baby in season 4 that he touched would be dead too. But there's a big mystery around going so far north beyond the wall where the White Walkers came from and the lands of Always Winter. And the other difference is the baby was a living being that was converted, not somebody dead.
So maybe he was supposed to be like the heir to the throne, right?
So these Craster's sons, and if you remember Samuel Tarly and Gilly was supposed to give the baby up, and Samuel saved the baby by killing one of the White Walkers. So that was one of Craster's biological sons too. So, the wheels can start spinning and you could say, okay, how do we bring Samuel Tarly back into this story? Is there a connection to the child that it was one of Craster's biological children and these other babies that have been delivered in the Game of Thrones universe or Game of Thrones world, we saw one of them. That we've been told that there are these other babies because Craster fathered a lot of children, and we saw where the Night King would touch them. Now they're living beings, so if I'm reading the tea leaves from this individual that has insider info, that would lead me to believe that the story would somehow relate to Jon Snow is north of the Wall and discovers something about the bigger issue around the White Walkers and maybe something even bigger than the Night King, and the fact that obviously the only way for the Night King to truly procreate or have something living would be these babies that he was able to touch. So I trust this source. Obviously how detailed that'll be in relation to what we see in the beginning of the Jon Snow series. I don't know. I'm gonna try to find out more information as we get more info comes out about what we think the story's going to be and what we hear from behind the scenes. But I have every reason to believe that this information broadly is accurate in terms of like where the story could pick up, and I think there's breadcrumbs that could be the case. Would that be something that you would think would be a natural progression of where you would want to see
Yeah.
the story?
Yeah, if you're gonna do something beyond the wall, it's gotta have the Night King. It's gotta have some kind of, uh, supernatural threat. Um, and the way that the Night King was dealt with at the end of Game of Thrones, I don't think a lot of people were happy with it.
He just kind of was killed. It was it, right? It was
Yeah,
over.
it was very anticlimactic. I thought an entire season should have been dedicated to that. And, it just doesn't really they're alluding to the prophecy so much in House of the Dragon that there's no way that there wouldn't be something, you know,
More to
there's
it,
yeah,
right?
there's got to be something more to it. There's got to be a reason why they're bringing that up, and I think that's the natural evolution, for Game of Thrones to pick up on. I think that would be the most interesting thing. Um, a lot of people have talked about, maybe having Daenerys come back. The dragon takes her to one of the Red Priestess. That's something they could work with.
But they don't have to do that right away. They
Right,
could see how the show unfolds. Now you don't want to uh, dilute the story
right.
if Daenerys's character has an
You don't
ending,
want it to
and
sound like fan fiction.
that's
You
right. I
know,
mean, she has to serve a purpose. Now I have to believe that what we saw at the end of the show with Drogon flying off to Volantis with Daenerys's body, and we know in Volantis the Red Priestesses they brought people back. They brought John back, so that's possible. But I couldn't. I would have a hard time seeing Daenerys being brought back to life and saying, "Oh, I'm going to go kill Jon Snow and
yeah,
reclaim the throne." I think if
right,
she was brought back, her character would be very impacted by what happened.
right,
By how her whole life was around saving people and freeing them, and at the end, you know, she ended up killing a lot of people, right?
right.
And then the throne was melted down. So another thing that was interesting as I went back and watched a few clips from the original Game of Thrones, as I was talking to this person who was telling me check out some of these episodes, and was that Bran at the end of the show, and I didn't really catch this. I didn't think about this until recently. Bran has the ability to see into the past, right? Like he saw Littlefinger's misdeeds. He knows what happened with Jamie, and so he could see into the past, and but he had trouble seeing Drogon. So he goes to the council and he asks them, "Has there been any sightings of Drogon?" So for someone that is the three-eyed raven, does the dragons, the sheer magic of dragons, hinder his ability to see? Because he leaves the meeting and says, "Hey, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
because
go. I'll go find him."
he
Right?
can use animals. He
Yeah.
can use their vision, but I guess he can't do it with a dragon,
Or
right?
he can't feel,
Alright.
or he can't put himself close by. I don't know. So I thought that was interesting because whatever happens, Drogon's not dead when the series ends.
Uh,
So we're going to see Drogon again. We're not going to see a new series and not see Drogon. That's just not going to happen. So for me, I think that the natural progression is what's happened in the north because we know John is there, and I think there's the way the Night King went out and the way that Jon Snow, and not to take anything away from Arya's character killing the Night King,
it just didn't
but
really fit.
yeah, but you had to think the Night King had a bigger plan in mind, and he just was taken out. So
By
the
episode 3, it
yeah,
was, wrapped up
yeah.
and done with.
So this would give you that natural. Oh, he was playing a bigger game.
Right.
and the story's not finished. And so, that's one of the things I wanted to cover today. It's some of the things I'm hearing from people that are connected to the larger Game of Thrones world around producers and people that have been involved with the shows and some people at HBO. So we'll see if that ends up being accurate. We'll keep tabs on it as the information starts to flow out. I anticipate that with House of the Dragon wrapping up their season, and it's we're now coming up on the end of the year. I think we're going to start to hear more information from HBO. This is their biggest property, and so they're going to want people to get excited.
They're
So I think
gonna
there's going to
milk
be
it
some.
for everything it's worth.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely, and why wouldn't he? It was the best thing on TV. And Game of Thrones, I mean, if you look back, I know there are issues around season 6, 7, and 8, but, for 5 seasons,
It
that
was
show was
great.
one of the best things I'd ever seen on TV. So, I'm certainly my faith has been restored into the Game of Thrones universe. So, those are the 2 things I wanted to catch us up on today, and we'll have more information as it comes out. If you like what you heard today, leave a comment below, hit the like button, let us know what you think, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so that we can grow our content. TCB.